YWCA. My name is Jen Gursky, and I am your executive director of this fantastic agency. We are 108 years with the Secretary of State this year, and the building that you are currently seated in was built for our agency 100 years ago because of thoughtful philanthropists in our community. We have a mission broadly to eliminate racism and empower women. And we do that through interrupting cycles of generational poverty and homelessness. Tonight, we are proud and honored to host you and our candidates who have stepped up to want a bat at elected office and leadership. I would like to introduce somebody who is the chair of your host tonight, the Social and Racial Justice Committee, Jessica McManus. Yes, please. Jessica McManus is a professor at Carroll College and is a board member for the YWCA. I would also like to introduce our moderator for tonight, John Adams. John Adams was, wait, you can't clap until you get his accolades. John Adams was the Capitol Bureau Chief for the Great Falls Tribune. He was a correspondent for USA Today, and he is currently the Executive Director and Editor-in-Chief of the Montana Free Press. We are eternally grateful that you said yes to hosting this, or moderating this tonight. Go easy.
Hello everybody, and thank you for coming. So I'm John Adams. Just got the introduction there, so I don't need to tell you anything about me. So tonight I will be asking 3 rounds of questions to each of the candidates. The order in which candidates are asked questions will be selected from random by Jess, who will be handing them to me. And the candidates will be given 90 seconds to respond to each question. No rebuttals tonight from other candidates. Questions were developed by the YWCA's Social and Racial Justice Committee and were sent out to all of the candidates in advance. Thanks to all of you for attending tonight's event. We're glad you're here. And we ask that you hold your applause during the question and answer period. This might also be a good time to ask you to turn your phones to airplane mode if you haven't already done that, so that we're not disrupting the candidates during their answers. We will not be taking questions from the audience tonight, but candidates may remain present after the forum to mingle with members of the community who came tonight to hear from them.
Why not?
Because those are the rules. But as I said, we're encouraging the candidates to stick around after the event, and the space will be available for individuals to meet with the candidates and ask questions. So please stick around. So we'd like to also thank the League of Women Voters, HCTV, the Social and Racial Justice Committee of the YWCA for their work, and the League of Women Voters will be is here with registration cards for anybody who is here and is not registered to vote. So who do we have here from the League of Women Voters? Okay, over here. So if you're not sure if you're registered to vote or if you need to register, check in with them after the forum. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome the candidates. Please hold your applause until after I've introduced each of them. For City Commission, please welcome in alphabetical order, Emily Dean. Next to Emily, we have Sean Logan. Next to Sean, we have Ed Noonan, Greg Painter, and Callie Wicks. And for Municipal Judge, please welcome Ann Peterson. All of the registered candidates for City Commission and Municipal Judge were invited tonight. So without further ado, let's begin. Do we have the first question? All right. So the first question is for Ed Noonan. Ed, how do you propose we expand access to public transportation?
One of our goals and one of the big issues is that right now we don't have public transportation in the evening and on weekends. We did add holidays this year because I pushed that holidays were still a mercantile day, most of them, except maybe for Christmas and Easter, and so people still had to get to work. The city's examining, under the leadership of Elroy Goldman, a plan to perhaps being able to offer that service of going to pick people up at night, more Uber style than having the big buses out. Hopefully that will come through. MILP has left a gap in that they used to be able to work with Capital Taxi to do that, but the funding is scarce. I hope in the future that we could work with MILP and maybe solve this, but there are some issues there that would have to be settled. It's really important that we understand that it's not an 8-to-5 world for many people who do need to work as well as get to necessary services and special events.
Thanks so much. The next question is for Callie Wicks. Callie, what kind of policies will you pursue to promote social and racial justice in our community?
Thank you, John, and thank you everyone who took time to be here this evening. One of the first things that I think is very important for us in order to promote social and racial justice in the community is to start at home. So that means to start with the city in terms of our hiring practices. I'm very excited that we now have women and women of color in 2 executive positions at the city, which is something we've never had before. I think that's very exciting for us. I also think that we have a lot of work to do on ADA compliance within all of our policies around the city, so that's something that is very important to me. Another thing that I'm very interested in working on is continuing to encourage inclusivity in our business community. We have a lot of fantastic businesses that support diversity and inclusiveness, and I think that is great for Helena's economy. It means a lot of tourists feel comfortable here, people feel comfortable here, and I think that that is something that we want to continue to do. The other piece that's very important is supporting our partners that do this work. One of the other things that we have recently done as a commission is we have set aside $30,000 for public priorities. These are RFPs that are available for all types of organizations in the city to work on issues of interest and to do the work that those specific organizations do. As you know, the city is, we're not on top of certain of everything here, but we certainly want to encourage folks that are doing that work. So thank you.
Thank you. And our first question for our municipal judge candidate, Ann Peterson. Ann, what is the responsibility of the judiciary to assist offenders in obtaining the services they need to make a permanent change for good in their lives?
So I think the biggest part of municipal court is to address each offender in each situation as a unique offense and a unique person. So the biggest issue we have is making sure either the offender or the attorneys are expressing the background, the situation, and what's going on so that the court can best address and sentence within its purview of the statute to address the needs of the offender, but also the needs of the community, the victims, and the witnesses, and anyone who might have been impacted. So we have a responsibility to sentence appropriately to both the crime and the offender, and I think that's what we need to remember and the most important piece of that.
Back to the city commission candidates. This question is for Sean Logan. Sean, what measures would you support to reduce the effects of climate change on public health?
Thank you. For me, and you're all going to think that I'm crazy in this answer, but I think one of the most significant effects of climate change locally here that significantly affects public health is what I call Helena's fire problem. And essentially, if we think about winters have been warmer and drier, summers have been hotter and drier, And they've really baked our forested landscape around us. And we're living essentially in a tinderbox. And I think the municipal leadership of Helena could do a far better job of educating our citizens so that we read routinely in the headlines about Paradise, California, Santa Rosa, California, and the tragic impacts that wildfire has on communities such as Helena. And we need to be providing a leadership role and pointing citizens actually to federal and state resources that are available to make their homes and properties more resistant to wildfire, and understanding their role when a wildfire comes to town in terms of evacuation. And I think in recent years we've been sitting on our hands as a municipality, and we need to do better.
Thank you, Sean. The next question is right here to my left, Emily Dean. Emily, what are your specific priorities to better support Helena's low-income families? What policy changes or investments are necessary to increase access to affordable housing?
Thank you, and I'd first like to thank the YWCA for hosting this event and John for moderating and all of you, the public, for being here. I think that improving opportunity in Helena is one of the greatest things that we could be doing right now. That's actually one of the top 3 reasons why I decided to run. In Helena, we have low unemployment, and yet we have businesses that continue to have jobs that go unfilled. I would like to see the City Commission play a much bigger role in facilitating bringing opportunity to our citizens. So that means the city can facilitate coordinating with our vast nonprofit community, our business community that's leading right now but needs the help, and our exceptional educational institutions that we have here in Helena. If we could facilitate those resources and bring folks together to really align ourselves to tackle this issue and improve quality of life for everyone in Helena, not just those who have access to education, but those who need a job, those who need skills. I would really like to see the City Commission play a much bigger role in facilitating those resources and bringing all of our partners in Helena together that are doing the work to make sure that we're aligning those resources and bringing opportunity to our citizens.
Thank you. And in the last to go in our first round of questioning, this question is for Greg Painter. Greg, Helena's homeless population is often hidden from view, but is still a factor we need to address. What specific changes would you like to see in the city? What specific changes would you like to see the city implement to identify and address the homeless in our community?
Well, thanks, John. Actually, the schools would be a great place to start. Teachers know their students and see it every day. It breaks my heart to hear about kids going hungry and not having a roof over their heads. I know food shares help feed hungry kids, and we need to give them all the support we can. The Friendship Center, God's Love, and YWCA have done a great job, and I would support them to the best of our ability. I want to be a good partner to the agencies on the front line that deal with this every day.
You can tell these aren't federal candidates. They're much more succinct in their responses. We appreciate that. Next question is for Ann Peterson, for municipal judge. Ann, how can the courts better protect people who have experienced domestic or sexual violence?
So this is a very good question and something that I have to deal with every day, both in criminal cases and in orders of protection. And judges have an incredibly difficult role when dealing with survivors of domestic or sexual violence. And the reason why is because we have to remain impartial, fair, and balanced throughout the entirety of the hearing, whether it be an order of protection or whether it be a criminal trial. And so we have to be careful and stay within our bounds and within our purview. However, I think it is important for any judge to know and understand the resources available in our community if someone is in crisis in my courtroom, so that I can make a call, I can talk to someone and see if I can get someone help. In addition, I think the court has to understand that at any time a survivor walks into that courtroom, it is likely going to be one of the most difficult days of their life, whether it's for a trial or for an order of protection hearing or simply to request an order of protection. And so having that compassion and understanding and realizing that maybe they won't make sense or they are in crisis and whatever reactions are happening are maybe not their norm. And recognizing that, realizing that, and making sure to treat everyone with dignity and respect in the courtroom.
Thank you, Ann. The next question is for Callie Wicks. Callie, Montana has the highest suicide rate in the country. What policy changes or programs do you propose we implement in Helena to help groups at risk of mental health issues and addiction that can lead to suicide, such as veterans, youth, and Native Americans?
Thanks, John. Well, again, I would go back to one of the things that we're working on is working directly with our city staff, teaching them to recognize the dangers of suicide both within our building and outside in the community. We hope that that is a good place to start and that that will, in turn, raise the level of awareness within the community. One of the other things that we've started instituting is when we're looking at surplus property and we're looking at how we dispose of that property, we've started to do a request for proposals. One of the things that we're putting into that request for proposal is a community benefit. So for example, if there is a business or entity that is looking at a specific building, we're definitely taking into consideration what those services are. Some of the things that we're looking at are mental health, youth transition shelters, addictions treatment and services. So we are hoping that by making these buildings a little bit more available, we will get folks that have more resources that will come into our community and will be able to better serve these populations.
Thank you, Callie. Greg Painter, what role do you see for city government in addressing gender inequality?
Well, being a business owner, I pay my people on performance, not on their gender. My wife works for the state, and the state doesn't have any rules that say females are paid this and males are paid that. So that's illegal. The city, I feel, is the same way. So basically, if there's a problem with gender and people not being paid correctly, I want to know about it. As a city commissioner. But if there's a problem, we need to know about it. But I know on the state and city level, I don't feel that's an issue because there's laws for that.
Thank you, Greg. Next question is for Sean Logan. Sean, access to government for all citizens is important to a functioning democracy. What steps would you take to make Helena City government accessible to all citizens, not just a select few insiders?
So I think sadly here our municipal leadership has fallen short in accessibility to its citizens and particularly transparency. We've seen and read of examples of lack of responsiveness toward the press, toward citizens groups, and citizens in general, as well as businesses. And I would say the place to start is to actively engage the press and social media to let citizens know what's going on in their city government. Make sure that citizens know that you are approachable and will listen, regardless of whether or not you agree with them. Don't have your mind made up going into a meeting. Quite often that nullifies any public comment that's offered at those meetings. If they feel like they're not being heard, or worse, that their publicly ridiculed, there goes your democracy. I think the city could do a far better job in archiving its meeting minutes. The last I looked, the minutes that were on were 2 or 3 months old, and I think HCTV might be able to do a better job of archiving regular meetings that are broadcast, so that citizens could have immediate access and easy access for them.
Thank you, Sean. Next question is for Ed Noonan. Ed, what do you believe is necessary to prevent domestic and sexual violence and stalking in our community?
Well, we have to be very aware and alert to how those issues impact many people, not only for spouses, but for other family members, for children. One of the good things that's happened with the city attorney's office is that Irina O'Connor developed a program to address domestic violence in very specific ways. Working with the police department and with many of the nonprofits in Helena, they have set up guidelines, have set up procedures to make sure that things are more confidential and that people are taken care of, to give them the counseling that they need. They work hard to find the right kind of location for them when they need it. The program just got accolades from the federal government, who's asking us to perhaps be involved in some trial runs that are coming up that would help us to expand this program. I think one of the missing pieces is how do we deal with children who sit in the shadow of these kind of issues and who need special care.
Thank you. Next question is for Emily Dean. Emily, access to government for all citizens is important to a functioning democracy. What steps would you take to make Helena City government accessible to all citizens and not just a few insiders?
Sure, thanks, John. One of the first things I did when I announced my candidacy was I submitted a proposal to make our city government more transparent. I don't believe that transformational or sustainable change in any organization can happen if those that are being served by that organization are not aware of what is going on and is not involved in the process. I also don't think that change can happen if there is not buy-in and some support from those that will be affected. And so there's a few things I would do. First, I would improve HelenaMT.gov. Right now, from what I've been able to gather, there's no one that is a sole administrator of the website, and so that means things are placed in many different locations. It's hard to find any particular document unless you know exactly where you're looking. The other thing that I would do was I would make sure that all meetings are scheduled in the city commission chambers, and that would include advisory boards as well, because I think that we should use the hardware that HCTV provides and help provide the resources to improve that hardware and software so that we are able to live stream and archive online every city commission meeting and those advisory commission meetings as well. The other thing that I would do is that I would make sure that we are consistently posting all meetings in multiple mediums. Right now you can see it in a few different, maybe it's a Facebook post, maybe it's a Facebook event, maybe it's on the website. There's no real clear direction. And then the other thing I would do is we need to proactively be reaching out to stakeholders. Bring in people. You can't expect them to read the agenda every other month. You need to make sure that you are reaching out to those affected.
Thank you. So we've gone through 2 rounds of questioning. We've heard each of the questions tonight, so now we're going to start hearing these questions. You've heard a couple of them repeated already. But starting with the 3rd round of questions, the questions for Callie Wicks. What are your specific priorities to better support Helena's low-income families? What policy changes or investments are necessary to increase access to affordable housing?
Thank you, John. Well, a couple of things. I do think housing is very important for Helena's low-income citizens. The first thing that we have done is we have funded a housing navigator position here at the city that will help our constituents find housing and resources to help them get there. We've also started looking at 2 different types of loans. We have housing improvement loans for low-income folks, and we have service line loans. Service line loans are very interesting. It's something that you could do to work on a sewer, for example. It's something that would then be paid back on your water bill. It's very easy. There are very low interest. So those are good things that we've started looking at doing. We're also looking at low-income tax credits. And again, we have our public services RFP that can be utilized to look at affordable housing. Another thing that I think is very important is public transportation. Commissioner Noonan pointed out earlier that folks don't just work from 8 to 5, so we are starting to look at transportation opportunities that are available 24/7 and that are affordable for our low-income populations. Again, I think supporting and partnering with organizations in the community that help our low-income families is another very important thing that we need to continue to do. And again, we have that $30,000 available to support grants that are available in that realm.
Thank you, Callie. Next question is for Greg Painter. Greg, what do you believe is necessary to prevent domestic and sexual violence and stalking in our community?
Well, for starters, police chief would be a good start. We need to support our law enforcement to the best of our abilities. The city has been a good friend of the Friendship Center as well as the YWCA, and I want to continue to support these great people who work so hard to help people in need. We need a bigger jail, because way too many people are being released because there's not enough room to house them. Drug use is out of control, and I don't feel it's being dealt with as good as it could be dealt with. As we all know, crime has skyrocketed. So once again, we need to support our law enforcement and give them all the help we can.
Thank you, Greg. Ann Peterson, what is your stance on community service or other alternative sentencing programs in the court? What considerations need to be made for those programs to be most effective?
So as judges, we are taught there are 4 things that we need to look at with respect to sentencing: retribution, incapacitation, deterrence, and rehabilitation. And with those goals in mind, I think it's important that the courts are allowed and are statutorily allowed to have alternative and more creative sentences. There's provisions in the statute that allow us to be able to do that, and I think it's a very important piece of our legislation because of what I said earlier, that every sentence has to be addressed not just to the crime, but also to the particular offender and what's going on with that individual. I do believe community service is a wonderful alternative. I see a lot of juveniles, and in order to effectuate a sentence that goes towards those principles, community service has been a great alternative for those juveniles. They can't pay a fine, so let's have them go into the community and work and see what this community has to offer. In addition, I have utilized pretrial services and their capabilities to issue behavioral health orders, and that's something new since I have started the bench. If someone has a serious disabling mental illness, instead of community service or a fine, their mental health appointments count towards their fine. So for every appointment, it's $10 off their fine. These are people who aren't going to be able to pay, but it is a community service for them to get their treatment. So I do believe alternative sentences are very important in our criminal justice system.
Thank you, Ann. Next question is for Sean Logan. Sean, Montana is the highest suicide rate in the country. What policy changes or programs do you propose we implement in Helena to help groups at risk of mental health issues and addiction that can lead to suicide, such as veterans, youth, and Native Americans?
I think we need to ensure that our Helena City Commission is a good partner to state, local, and federal resources that exist in our community to bring about awareness of mental health issues and suicide, and continue to help eliminate the stigma that exists with mental illness. My father recently died, and I've had the opportunity to reflect on his life and what our relationship meant. He suffered significantly with mental illness, and one of the things that he taught us, our family, and he was really the first of his family to break out of that stigmatized quality of mental illness, was how important it is to understand that mental illness is as real and as treatable as any physical ailment. And I think the awareness is the first critical step for anyone to get help. So I think a commissioner could use his or her leadership role to help local agencies, government, and nonprofits to educate those struggling with mental illness about resources that are available in our community to help them on the path to better mental health.
Thank you, Sean. Next question is for Ed Noonan. Ed, Helena's homeless population is often hidden from view, but is still a factor we need to address. What specific changes would you like to see the city implement to identify and address the homeless in our community?
Well, there's one missing piece in the community that we have to find a way to deal with. We have agencies doing good work, like the YWCA for transitional housing, and many of them have specific missions, like the Y to serve women. We have some agencies like God's Love and Our Place that are helping people on a limited basis. But when somebody needs a residence, we have so few options. There's a long waiting list at the Helena Housing Authority. People wait for a long time, and where are they waiting? They're in the car. It really breaks your heart when you see that a family of 3 who pretty much are stuck in that situation. The missing piece that we have is that their federal grants are mainly for providing residence on a very general basis to families, and an organization would have to take that on. It would mean building maybe small efficient units, would mean having a variety of units for people. Doesn't mean they have to own them. They can rent it, and they can even get subsidies for rent. But in looking at it, I think this is the one avenue we have to explore to find more housing in a world where there's very little.
Thank you, Ed. And believe it or not, we're already to our final question of the evening. This question is for Emily Dean. Emily, what measures would you support to reduce the effects of climate change on public health?
Excellent, thank you for the question. So this is great timing. 2 weeks ago, I put out a proposal to address just one issue that can help mitigate climate change that can be done locally, that we already have made a commitment to. So about 20 years ago, Helena made a commitment that we want to prioritize recycling. One thing that we found though is that right now we're not very effective at doing that, and we're not very good at bringing it to multiple populations. So one thing I would like to see is more policies, budgeting, and operations to reduce waste within Helena. I think that we need to change the culture where we are less wasteful. I also would like to see the city do more in terms of composting. There are multiple municipalities across the country that have citywide composting services. One thing that I don't think most of the general public knows is that when you go to the transfer station and you drop off your yard waste, there's a big pile of branches and grass clippings and leaves. Most people think that's going to compost. From my understanding, that is not being composted, it's being buried, which puts off even more methane. I would like to see the city make a priority of composting what we already have, and then expanding those resources and making sure that they're accessible to everybody in our community, not just the few that can afford for a recycling service to come pick up the recycling.
Well, excellent. I would like to thank each of the candidates for coming by tonight and taking part in this community forum. I'd like to thank all of the citizens who came by to hear from the candidates. I'd like to thank the YWCA Social and Racial Justice Committee, HCTV for recording our event tonight, and of course the League of Women Voters, who again, if you're not registered, stop by and see the gals in the corner there, and they can help you get registered to vote. Voting's important. I hope everybody in this room, and I expect if you're here tonight, you probably plan to vote, but certainly I'd encourage you to. I just want to thank, again, everybody for coming by tonight to hear from all of our candidates, and let's give them a round of applause.